Okay, well, my talk will be very informal. First, I have to apologize because Marianne and Nancy have heard it a couple of times. So even though I'm not really sure what I'll say, probably what I'm going to say, they've pretty much heard most of it. But first disclaimer, because my wife gets after me, she said, you never take credit. So I'm going to take my credit first. Warren County Education Endowment is a product of my brain, probably about 1990. And the reason for it probably came from, I served a little over 14 years on the Board of Supervisors, and I was mayor for 8 years. So the things that I learned and observed is the impetus sort of for the reason that I thought that we needed to do something like this endowment. Now, a few things, and I know you know a lot about Front Royal and Warren County, but maybe some things that may be somewhat news for you. Back in 1940, and this was just about the time World War II was starting, the population of Front Royal was about 4,000 people. Okay, by 1950, just 10 years later, the population was 7,500. So in a short 10-year period, the population of Front Royal almost doubled. Well, what caused that? And if you were raised here, you pretty well know what caused it. It's because American Viscose came to Front Royal. American Viscose was a British-owned rayon producing factory, the largest rayon producing factory in the world at the time. And they built a plant in Front Royal, Virginia. And the purpose of the plant was really for war-making materials, tire cord, parachute, whatever the silk or the rayon they used for parachutes, but some of the things that they needed for the war. And that was the reason that American Viscose came. And so the town of Front Royal grew from 4,000 to 7,500 in that 10-year period, which is, wow, boom, that's a great thing. Yes, but there's a negative side to the great thing, because we were a boom town. And that's probably the reason that I'm in Front Royal now, because we were living in Bethesda, Maryland before the war. My father was building there. After the war, there was such a demand for housing in Front Royal that he started building. He built Bel Air Heights and then later Marlow Heights. They built a lot of houses. So I ended up being raised and going through the Warren County public school system. So talk a little about education. The result of the growth of Front Royal during that period, 10 years, the negative side was the average education level of a Front Royal citizen dropped 4 years. 4 years. Now, back then, going to college was not for everybody. In fact, it was really just for a small group of people. But for most people, maybe a 10th grade education was all they had. Well, when American Viscose came and the population expanded, where'd they come from? Appalachia, West Virginia, Southwest Virginia, itinerant farmers, people, day laborers. People could come to Front Royal, maybe making before 50 cents, $1 an hour. At that time, making $2.50, $2.70, whatever they made. But when you could come to Front Royal, they were able to buy a house, buy a car, and really live the American dream. So it was really a good thing for the people who came to Front Royal. But what did it do for the education? We were 4 years behind in education from our surrounding counties, especially Winchester, Frederick County, Clark. We had this tremendous growth, but we were lagging with our education. So American Viscose was the bread and butter of Front Royal and Warren County for a lot of years. But as time changed and things evolved, they got into trouble. They had pollution issues. Just the rayon business, the nature of their business was deteriorating. So they were becoming a very troubled company, and they were losing employees, but they still were big. They're still, a couple thousand employees, but they weren't what they were during the war years and shortly after that. I know when I went to school, Mostly all your classmates, their parents worked at American Viscose. That's what everybody did. And there was a good living. It was good for these people, but our education system suffered. So as Avtex, which American Viscose became Avtex, as it deteriorated, got in more trouble, the community was looking for more ways to find and try to attract industry. Fortunately, we were able to attract DuPont. And DuPont came to Front Royal before Avtex closed. They were in the process of building and establishing the place out at where they're at on 522. But one of the things that I observed when DuPont came is, where did the people who DuPont brought in, because they brought in a whole management team, where did they live? Well, I can tell you the plant manager and maybe assistant plant manager built a nice home out of around the golf course out of Rockland. But where did the next level of management live? Winchester, Frederick County. Why? Because they perceived the schools in Winchester and Frederick were better than they were in Warren County. And they were. Because for Warren County people, education wasn't as important as it was for the people in our neighboring counties. So this is one of the things that made me wonder, what do we need to do? Because when you're talking to the state industrial development people, one of the first things that prospects want to know about, how's your education system? They want to know how your schools. And our schools really weren't what they should be. I can tell you, being on the Board of Supervisors, getting budgets, it was a fight every year. We had two members of our board who just automatically were no votes on anything. And so it was a tough job to try to get any sort of progressive education passed. So DuPont came and we're just thinking, what can we do? Why are we not what we could be? And I can remember back when I was in high school, who was our big rival? Hanley. Hanley had everything. They just, if they needed it, they had it. They had a beautiful track over there. We didn't have a track at all. We had a field up behind the high school. We'd go up and work out, and we would try to play with Hanley, but Hanley was our rival. They will always seem to be just a step above us. If they needed something, they got it. And it was the Hanley Trust Fund. And because Hanley was endowed by a privately endowed trust fund, and it was the Hanley Trust Fund. And so I started looking into it, and I realized they didn't have as much money as I thought. I thought they had unlimited amounts of money. They didn't. They had money, and they had a reputation of being a privately endowed public school system, which they probably were the only one, if not the only one, only two maybe in the state. So we said, that's what we should do. We can do that. Let's become develop a privately endowed trust fund for Warren County. So a group of us got together, and I will say it was some of the people, and I can tell you who our original founders were, because it was 1994 when we put this group together. And the founding members of our board, Dr. Richard Nana, John K. Marlow, Carol Dodson, David Crump, T.W. Grove, Reverend Mark Jordan, John LaBarca, David McDaniel. Well, with the exception of John LaBarca, the others had worked on a committee that we had in the town when we knew that Avtex was going to be leaving. We had planned the best we could for the day that they were going to close their doors. And they did close their doors while I was mayor. And we had a group of people who had been put together, and all these people bring a special talent to an organization that we were set up to help, because people at Avtex had a job one day, the next day they didn't have a job. And a lot of them had worked there for many years and really weren't trained to do anything except work at Avtex. So we had a committee set up to help them. Well, this is the group that originally put our endowment together. And the endowment we said, and it was my idea, I said, we're going to raise $1 million. Well, they all really thought I was crazy, raise $1 million. And I said, well, we can do it, and we will do it. And so we adopted our bylaws and set our goal as $1 million. Well, we were pretty happy, and because we had the Moose, DuPont, American Legion, got a good bit of support from a number of these organizations to start with. So we had some money. Went to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors had just had an election, and there was a new group that came in. Jim McManaway, Tiedrick had come in, a group, and all of a sudden there was a school building that the county had actually funded and had actually let a contract to build. Shockey was going to build a new high school, and they said no. They stopped it. And they also said to us, why don't you all go do something else? We don't want the endowment. So that sort of set us back for a while. But that board changed, and another board came in, and they were much more receptive. Well, since that time, we have raised our $1 million. We've gone over it. Sometime last year, a year before, we hit $1.5 million, then $1.6 million. Now, I'll say the stock market's been a little rough on us this year, so we're taking a little tap back, but hopefully that's temporary and we'll get back, because our goal now is to reach $2.5 million, and we will do that. And we have sponsored and helped programs, not bricks and mortar. The school board builds schools. What we do is we take applications from teachers that have been approved by the school system for maybe special needs that they have. And we'll approve those with the idea, if this is good and it works, then the school board will probably fund it next year. An example of that are these smart boards that we have, these whiteboards. The first one in the Warren County school system, the Warren County Education Endowment funded. That was the first one. That was innovative. Nobody knew how they'd work. Now, every classroom in the county has one. Another example, elementary school a few years ago, we had a little program, it was the Boys and the Gentlemen, it had a maybe different name, but some troubled young boys that maybe came from disadvantaged homes were brought in, and they were given enough to buy a coat and tie, breaker, a little jacket, and they would go maybe the Board of Supervisors meeting, hand out agendas, greet people when they'd come in. And that program really helped gain confidence and help these young men become young men. And it's really been a successful program. I don't know how many programs we've adopted or approved, 70 at least, of programs. And a lot of these are just one-time things, but a number of them have been things that the school board said, hey, that's a good idea. Now we'll fund it. So that's somewhat what our education endowment's all over. And am I okay on time?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing
that's
great.
about it.
Great. That was good.